You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, Internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687. 687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Attention business owners and independent contractors. This is a money-saving message from Tax Mediation Services. If your business owes $20,000 or more in taxes, we can help you today, right now. Listen, dealing with the IRS is no picnic. It's an intimidating and extremely stressful process, and you don't want to go it alone. Our attorneys know every law, every tax break, and every possible opportunity to help you resolve and reduce your tax debt. And if you owe more than $20,000, you may be at the top of their hit list. So don't take your tax debt lightly, because it will not go away on its own. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, your home, and even shut down your business. Call our tax experts today at 1-800-783-0810 and let us deal with the IRS while you focus on your business. That's 1-800-783-0810. Again, that's 800-783-0810.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
This is Dawn on the Air. It's a look at today's news and social commentary from an eyes-wide-open perspective. It's up to us to ensure the issues of today are decided by us, not for us, because no one will give us liberty. We must claim it for ourselves. Yeah, last week I devoted the show to a discussion about sexual assault. You know, I won't rehash it here, but I received some reaction. I mean, not much, but, I mean, folks, you know, they like to be nitpicky, and they believe if we use a broad catch-all term instead of specifically defining terms, that we lower the intensity of the whole thing. Now, I agree, you know, this is true in circumstances like, I don't know, racism. I mean, when we claim everything is racist, you know, we lower the bar really low, then we become conditioned to the term, you know. As a result, racism, it tends to lose its impact. But, no, this isn't the same thing. No, hi. I'm Don Weston, and this is Dawn on the Air. You see, the reason a term like racism loses its impact is because, you know, you're using one term to describe different things. I mean, racism, you know, it's when you make a judgment about someone's capabilities based on their race. It's essentially the act of placing one's race above another due to genetics. But you see, if you're excluded from an activity because people dislike your race, that's actually discrimination. And if somebody, you know, they make snap judgments about you because of your race, well, that's prejudice. Now, in these examples, you know, prejudice and discrimination, they really have nothing to do with deciding that one race is superior to another. I mean, nor are they making judgments on capability based on race. So I do understand, you know, that folks would prefer that I use specific terms like molestation and rape instead of a catch-all like assault. But you see, the difference is that assault, it actually applies to rape and molestation. An assault, you know, it's an attempt to injure someone physically. Sexual, of course, you know, that adds the sexual element to it. But if you're doing something sexual to someone without their consent, you are injuring them, and you're doing it physically. Therefore, it's an assault. The problem comes when people try to use non-physical acts as assault, like harassing someone. The difference is an assault has to take place physically. Telling someone they have a nice butt isn't physical, unless they grab it or something. So that was one of the perceived problems with the Me Too hashtag campaign last week. Alyssa Milano tweeted the suggestion that if women who were assaulted used Me Too in their profile status or, you know, whatnot, that we would get a sense of the enormity of the situation. Now, of course, you know, this isn't a scientific study. I mean, more than anything, you know, it was a way for women to come forward and say, yes, you know, I was also abused, in a way that where they wouldn't have to go into detail, you know, or really put themselves out on display or fear retaliation. They could simply just say, me too. You know, and that's a liberating feeling, to be honest. But it didn't take long for people to try to drag it down. And I mean, some of it was for good reason. I mean, after all, you know, Alyssa Milano, I mean, she's an ultra-feminist, and she promoted this specifically for women. And, you know, much of her rabid fan base enforced that unwritten law. Sexual assault is a woman's issue. All others can take a hike. You know, so as with other movements, you know, I have no real respect for the leaders or the militants. I mean, they exist to push their personal agenda. I mean, in the case of Me Too, that agenda is to degrade men. I mean, that's why the focus is on women only. You know, it enforces the misconception that assault only occurs to women, and generally by men in powerful positions. It's nonsense. And it's dangerous to mischaracterize assault this way. Some folks, they're trying to be inclusive with the Me Too movement, and I get that, but those are individuals. This was specifically promoted a certain way, and that's the agenda that's being pushed by the rank and file followers. Now, it's the same for me across the board. I don't support movements that push agenda with division. Remember, divided, we fall? I'm not down with that. But that's why I don't use the Me Too hashtag. I'm not buying into the division. Instead, I started using hashtag any one of us, with the one being a number one. Now, admittedly, I'm not a trendsetter or anything, so, it's not a big deal to me, but I just wanted to use something, and I wasn't about to use Me Too because, I'm male, and apparently I'm the enemy. But what really gets me going, look, I understand wanting to oppose Alyssa Milano, and, I just demonstrated a proper way to do so. I do think we need to draw more attention to assaults. There are just ways to go about it that aren't, patently offensive. Now, I'm not sure if they, don't think of these things because they seek to be provocative, or, if they truly just don't understand because they haven't experienced a trauma like a sexual assault. I'll give some of these people the benefit of the doubt, unless they give me a reason to believe otherwise. Now, I preface my next comment that way because it's about Ben Shapiro. He doesn't seem to understand how all of this unburdening of the soul, how it actually helps victims and might actually lead to fewer assaults. You see, Shapiro, he published an article I found in the Daily Wire entitled, "Raising Awareness Isn't Helping Much." Now, Shapiro and I, we tend to agree often, but this is one subject where he clearly just doesn't get it. And that's not his fault. Judging from much of social media, many people just don't understand. People, they generally don't go out into this world looking to be assaulted. That just doesn't happen. So you might wonder, well, then how does it happen? Well, like most crime, it usually blindsides you. It's most often something completely unexpected. We let our guard down, or we just assume that, it can't happen to us, or it couldn't possibly happen here. Come on. Now, look, the idea to me, at least, is, well, look, number one, you stop dragging the baggage around. When you speak out about this sort of thing, it weighs heavily on your soul. And the only way I found to lessen that is to unburden yourself by talking about it. So, yeah. When we talk about it, it helps the victim, okay? Now, secondly, when it comes to prevention, excuse me, Mr. Shapiro, here's some of that logic you were asking for. All right? Awareness is everything. Remember, sexual assault, it generally catches us by surprise. If we're aware, then we're less likely to be surprised, right? So when I talk about awareness, I'm not implying that no one is aware of sexual assault. Now, I know I can seem misanthropic at times, but even I have that much faith in Americans. Surely they know sexual assault exists, right? And surely they know that it happens far too often. But no, I'm talking about situational awareness. You could be in a situation where, say, you need to get from one street to another, right? And you don't want to have to walk all the way to the end of the block, and then walk over and then walk all the way back down. So instead, you decide to cut through an alley. Now, anything could happen to you in this alley, from being raped, mugged, murdered to nothing at all. You could be safe. But the thing is, if you've never been assaulted in an alley, or you've never known anyone to be assaulted in an alley, or never even heard of anybody being assaulted in an alley, then you may not even realize that walking down that alley could be dangerous. It doesn't mean that someone's stupid. It just means that they don't recognize the potential danger that alley represents. Now, if that same person happens to hear a story about how someone was brutally beaten in that alley 20 years ago, then that's one of the things that they add to the catalog of possible alleyway outcomes. That person might think, wow, it'd be awful if something like that happened to me, so, maybe I'll just go around. This might not have occurred to them otherwise. And if you don't like the idea that, people don't name names and whatnot when they speak out 20 years later, if you don't like that, You have to realize that more often than not, there's a statute of limitations. So if you don't like it, change the system. You know, I mean, I would caution you against criminalizing the victim. Those who've truly been assaulted, I mean, they're victimized enough, man. I mean, first by the assailant, right? Then by themselves. And finally by the people. All of you. I mean, again, I'll give a guy like Shapiro the benefit of the doubt because, I mean, he's a smart guy. And, you know, he wants to see accountability. All right? I get that. He wants allegations to be proven, and he wants to see the offenders punished. I mean, that's what we all want. But I got to say, I mean, to be frank, you know, if someone's going to make up a story, I'd actually prefer it be about someone faceless or nameless. I mean, sure, you know, if the story isn't true, I definitely want it disproven. But at the same time, you know, I'm aware that, you know, the mere accusation of sexual impropriety can ruin a life, even when the accusation's eventually proven false, because there'll always be doubt somewhere. You know, there'll always be immediate consequences to just a mere accusation. You know, like losing your job or being destroyed by the media, you know, and convicted in the court of public opinion. But anyway, speaking of the court of public opinion, you know, there's other stuff going on, like the Rand-Trump order. Yeah, you know, the health insurance executive order. I wanted to call it the Order of Rand, but it sounds a little cultish, don't you think? I don't know, maybe that's what I'll call the Rand Paul Republicans. Yeah, you know, the guys who run on the Republican ticket but have nothing in common with the Republican Party, so they just join up to use their resources. And then, you know, they have to eventually, you know, cater to the party whim here and there so they can keep their membership benefits. And I'm not saying that I have anything against these guys, like, personally. I mean, honestly, I don't. I mean, most of them, you know, they at least claim to support liberty. I'm just saying, you know, the more ways you mislead people, the less trustworthy you appear, right? But I have a guest later, Taylor Fischer, and he'd probably have a more well-rounded opinion of the executive order than I would. So I'll ask him later on. But no, I wanted something a little more, I don't know, Federalist? Let's see. Oh, yeah, the Republicans. You know, they're toying with our taxes again. No, I haven't really studied what they're up to just yet. I'll be getting into that in the next few weeks. But one thing I do know is whatever they're doing, it won't be nearly good enough. You know, it won't be close. And that'll be by design. And how do I know? Well, I mean, in order to make meaningful changes to our tax code, you have to also introduce massive spending cuts. You know, and this isn't a talking point. This is just reality. I mean, you see, we're $20 trillion in debt. Nearly $20.5 trillion to be warmer. And even with the Republican hat trick, you know, the debt is still skyrocketing. USDebtClock.org, it's brutal. But the point is, you know, we're spending ourselves into oblivion. You know, our government, I mean, they don't create money. Sure, they print money, but of course, the more money they print, the less valuable it becomes. So, no, the government doesn't generate profit. You know, they're funded primarily by taking from others. And the problem is, we expect them to now take less money while our debt continues to explode. I mean, look, let's put this into perspective, okay? Let's look at this with eyes wide open. The debt increases at a rate of about $28,000 per second. Yes, per second. That's what? 28,000 divided by, 52 weeks is 538, okay? Divided by 40 hours a week is, like, what, $13.40 an hour? So before taxes, right? Every second, our debt goes up an entire year's salary for someone making around $13.40 an hour. An entire year's salary in 1 second. So no, they're not going to cut taxes until that number slows down considerably. I mean, we can't afford to. But of course, you know, the problem is our federal government, they just don't adhere to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. I mean, if they did, the federal government spending would be in a far more manageable range. Ideally, all the government would be paying for are issues related to like managing our currency, our national defense, and our interactions with foreign entities, including immigration. I mean, that's the nutshell version anyway. Do you notice what's not on that list? Health insurance, health care, education, birth control, environmental protection, and a myriad of other programs that all fall within the authority of the states. Now, the biggest reason the states can't handle these different issues is because they can't afford it. They don't have the resources to manage these issues properly. But you see, if the federal government wasn't overtaxing us for things it shouldn't be taxing us for, the states could tax us more appropriately to help fulfill the needs of its citizens. Preferably, with the consumption tax rather than an income tax. I mean, you got to figure, if goods are only taxed at appropriate times, rather than at every stop along the way of its development, then the cost of the goods would be driven down. I mean, as it is, there are taxes for the refinement of minerals, taxes for selling those to manufacturers, taxes for compressing them into a material. Then there's taxes on selling that to someone who shapes it into a product. And then there's taxes on selling that to a distributor. And then taxes on getting it onto retail shelves. And then taxes when you buy it. Without all these various taxes, our goods could cost far less, driving down our cost of living. And for all you socialists out there, this is how we all get to live like kings. We cut out the middleman every step along the way. But no, you guys, you want to take from the wealthy and make everyone equally poor. The money for us to all live wealthy is already out there. We just have to stop giving it to the government. Stop giving everything, to the very entity that you want to empower in order to take control of those who have what you want. It makes no sense. Your quest for equality is what drives your need for equality. If we just rein in the government rather than feed the government, we would all have more of everything. I mean, come on, guys. Yeah, let's take from the rich and give to the government. Yes, because, they'll make us all equal. There's no part of that which makes sense. The Constitution, that's our only defense from a tyrannical government. Tyrannical doesn't necessarily mean cruel, by the way. I have a Federalist moment around here somewhere, just about this very thing. But anyway, the Constitution is our only defense from a tyrannical government. And these people, that's right, I said these people, socialists, they want to ignore the limits set on government. They want to give the government more power, more control. All they see is what the government can do for them. They're not seeing what the government will do to all of us once it controls the production and distribution of our goods and services. I mean, it's just the truth, man. I mean, I can't help it. You don't have to like it, but disliking it doesn't make it less true. Article 1, Section 8 exists for a reason. It defines the role of the federal government. I mean, when someone asks, well, what about everything else? Well, then we have the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, which takes place in Article 1, Section 8, nor prohibited by it to the states, as in unalienable rights, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. It honestly couldn't be clearer. $20.5 trillion in debt. They make you think that it's no big deal, right? I mean, they act like it's no big deal to be in debt. I mean, always someone out there ready to lend money too, from credit cards to quickie car loans. People are prone to say, screw it, and just go out spending. Over here, we're a frugal couponing family. And if we tell him that we don't want to spend money on something, our youngest son will sometimes say, well, they give you cash at, a national title pawn place, and you get your title back. I mean, we try to explain, no, that's not how it really works. They loan you money and then you have to pay back, a lot more money than you borrowed. But then he'll kindly suggest that we just go to the bank to get money. And of course, we have to explain, no, you have to go out and earn that money and put it in the bank for safekeeping, Otherwise, you have no money that you can get out. And I mean, sure, we do a good job of counteracting these influences, but the point is, these influences, they're everywhere. And they get into our children, when they're young. They get into these habits of consume. And that's what they're raised on. And so when they grow up, that's what they do. And the government wants it this way too. I mean, they want us obsessed with things and broke. Because then, we look around and we see things that other people have and we can't afford it because, we're overtaxed and our goods are overtaxed and we're obsessed with things and we can't have these things. So we demand the government take those things, from others and give them to us. And so the government listens, and they go out and they take those things and then it distributes it all, as it sees fit. The ruling class, how they dictate. And it all leads to the same place. I mean, the only other way is to honor our federalist structure and maintain the balance of power as defined by the United States Constitution. Speaking of federalism, here, I'm going to take a short break, and when I return, I'll have a guest with me, Taylor Fischer, president of the board of the Federalist Coalition. Yeah, we'll get into all things federalism when Don on the Air returns in a moment. This is a Federalist Moment with Don Weston, brought to you by the Federalist Coalition. An often used term by our founders is tyranny. When people think of tyranny, they often imagine scenes of severe oppression with a populace in chains, beaten in the streets and degraded while their government overseers order the execution of family members and the seizure of personal property. These visions, they're not quite an American reality, but this is not the only description of tyranny. Our founders, they used the term tyranny in the context of a tyrannical government. Now remember, at the time, our founders were working to secure the autonomy of our states. The Constitution itself is a document specifically designed to limit the power of a centralized federal government. So what if I told you that another definition of tyranny is simply a government in which absolute power is vested in a single ruler? Is it not then reasonable to conclude that our founders may have been referring to an overpowered centralized federal government as a tyrannical government? A government doesn't necessarily have to be cruel to be tyrannical. Oppressive is enough. Either way, you can't have a tyrannical government unless it's the only government. As we continuously empower a centralized federal government, we willingly hand ourselves over to the tyrannical government our forefathers warned us about. But it's not too late. We still have time to re-empower the states by forcing candidates to actually earn our votes by declaring themselves defenders of the Constitution and focusing on reclaiming autonomy for our states. At the very least, we must demand that they uphold their oath of office, an oath that they swear to the Constitution. We must not give ourselves over to tyranny by willingly sacrificing our liberty. Our Constitution, it's designed to protect us from our own federal government. Let's allow the Constitution to work as intended. Federalism is the key. It's a way of life. It's the American way of life. Now you can discover more truths about federalism at thefederalistcoalition.org. This is Don on the Air. Welcome back to Don on the Air. With me tonight is a most distinguished gentleman. He's everyday American Taylor Fischer. Now, Taylor serves as the president of the board of directors for the Federalist Coalition. Now, that's the nonprofit organization I helped found and currently serve as an executive director for. I only mention that, in the interest of full disclosure. He's here as a guest to discuss the Federalist Coalition and a few of their initiatives. Maybe we can get into a bit of what makes the Federalist Coalition so effective. Greetings, Taylor. Welcome to Dawn on the Air.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, man. The pleasure is all mine. Hey, listen, I tend to play a lot of Federalist moments and an American Foundation here and there, both of which are produced for and by the Federalist Coalition. Other than that, it's really rare that I even mention the Federalist Coalition. I thought maybe, would you mind sharing with my listeners what it's all about?
Yeah, without a doubt. So a couple of things I usually tell people when we talk about this. First of all, I want to say we started back in 2016 just as a group of concerned Americans, like you mentioned, we call ourselves everyday Americans, but concerned Americans who were just kind of not happy with the direction our country was going in and wanted to do something more than just vote and then complain, so to speak. So we got together and we formed the Federalist Coalition. Our main function is to remind fellow citizens of the importance of federalism, how it relates to the Constitution, and why this is imperative for our nation. And we do this through education and also through legislative advocacy. You can actually see this, our mission statement, on our website, www.federalistcoalition.com. And you can even follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page or Twitter @RealFedCo, and we'd be happy to have you follow us.
Hopefully we can help empower individuals, who feel like they're helpless with politics. Hopefully remind them that they can actually run for office when they talk, to members of their own community and get them fired up about a cause that's important to them. They can get the community behind them, right?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, we're everyday Americans. Most of us are, or I should say all of us, are folks with full-time jobs who do other things. And again, when I talk to people, I say none of us are politicians and none of us are political operatives. And so that's kind of difficult. And it's a challenging thing for folks like us to witness the political machine and decide to do something about it. So I think a lot of what we do is empowering other people to join us and to become educated and to hopefully make a difference, where they can.
Well, you mentioned that we're not political operatives, and that's very true. But that must mean that we're different than political parties. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, there's a couple of things we can talk about here. And the first thing is to really kind of understand what federalism is. So federalism is sort of the framework on which our country is built. It's based around a division of power, and particularly in American federalism between state and federal power. Okay. The reason that's important and the reason that's important to kind of what we're talking about here is that we are not, we're not a partisan body. Okay. So federalism should sit outside of politics, we believe. Now, I tend to lean perhaps a little more conservative, but there's members in our organization that tend to lean a little more liberal and a little more libertarian. But that's okay because, like I said, federalism should really sit outside the bounds of politics. That allows us to do things in a nonpartisan way, and I think is appealing to a lot of Americans sort of across the political spectrum as a result.
Well, that is an important point that you're making. I mean, the Federalist Coalition isn't bipartisan. I mean, it's not tripartisan. It's nonpartisan, because it seems to me that some of the greatest problems that we face in our country is the division that that we're all facing. I mean, you see it everywhere, and it starts with, well, to me, it kind of goes hand in hand with party politics, where everybody chooses a side, and so we're automatically divided there. But then we see all this racial tension and racial divisions. I mean, it's like people, whenever there's some chink in the armor of our union, the unity of our citizens, it seems like people just kind of go after it and do the best they can to divide that wider. And I feel as though the Federalist Coalition, just kind of ignores all of that. And it feels like there are forces at work out there, trying to disrupt that and keep us separated, probably because we're easier to control,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. So a lot of the things that we see that are wrong with our country right now kind of revolve around the divisive nature of things currently, just like you mentioned. If it's not, political division, it's some other type of division. But people really just have sort of a team mentality, and sometimes you'll even notice where it doesn't even matter what a particular politician is saying, as long as it's something coming from their team. And we're trying to sort of step over that or conquer it. In fact, I think one of the very first social media posts that we had, and maybe the listeners can go back and check on this, but something to the effect that the time for linear or partisan politics is over. Okay, and we need to move beyond that. And that's kind of where we are. And one of the things we're doing to kind of get to that place is we're actually working on some legislation at the state level that will hopefully sort of heal some of the wounds that our country has had, and sort of put things back into balance and allow people to come together in a way that isn't quite so partisan.
That's an interesting point. Part of reintroducing our citizenry to federalism and the importance of our Constitution, we deal a lot with citizenry, but we also have to deal with the current structure that's in place and the politicians that are already in office. And it seems to me, when taking a nonpartisan approach, we're not a threat to anybody that's currently in office, basically. We position ourselves where we can work with current politicians, right?
Absolutely. And we've been working with some politicians on, again, some of the legislation that we're trying to get passed, in particular state-level politicians in Utah, North Carolina, and South Carolina. But they've been very receptive to what we had to say so far.
Well, go ahead. Tell us about this legislation.
Yeah, so what we're trying to let me back up here and start over here and say that we started working with a gentleman out of Utah by the name of Ken Ivory, and he is a representative in Utah's state legislative body. He's very, very concerned about federalism, just like we are. He helped form in Utah what's called a Federalism Commission, or a Commission on Federalism. And the purpose of this commission is to evaluate legislation, federal edict, regulation that comes out of the federal government, evaluate it, compare it to the Constitution, the principles of federalism, and then if it doesn't line up, the legislation provides a mechanism for sort of rectifying the problem. So it also allows us to record things that are unconstitutional. And I know that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you look at the Declaration of Independence, one of the greatest documents in our country's history, a lot of that information was able to put together because the colonists had been recording these overreaches by King George. So it's very important to do that. It also allows the states to work together to hopefully, again, push back and reclaim some of their power more aggressively. So really what it does overall is it reestablishes the states as buffers between the people and the federal government. And like I said, this is really a bipartisan thing. This is something that should hopefully appeal to individuals in, California just as easily as it would appeal to individuals in Texas or some other state, which we might generally think of as having different political ideologies.
So this Federalism Commission, it's kind of like a watchdog committee, isn't it? Where they're kind of collecting data and preparing claims. One of the mechanisms that we have in our Constitution is a way to address grievances with our government. And if we don't have, a list of what these grievances are, how do we even focus any efforts? It sounds pretty important to me, but is it just focused on, like, say, the things the president does or things Congress does, or does it apply to subordinate organizations like the DOJ and the IRS and like even the Supreme Court?
So yes and no. It really should apply to any, again, when you look at the legislation, it applies to any law, any federal or executive order, action, memorandum, departmental decree, anything that has sort of the force of law would be something that can be evaluated by the Federalism Commission. As far as the judiciary, not currently, not in the legislation currently, but outside of that, pretty much everything else can be submitted to the commission for review.
That's cool. Yeah, it sounds like we could use a national or federal Federalism Commission as well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is incremental steps, of course, but eventually it sounds like that would be a good idea too.
Yeah, that one might be kind of hard. A federal Federalism Commission, then who's going to watch the federal Federalism Commission? You have a federal Federalism Commission. I'm not sure if that'll work out.
Part of the problem that we have right now is that we have what, the foxes guarding the hen house, you know, so it's not, you know, that's not too helpful. But I was just thinking, or at least maybe the legislation could eventually be expanded to where, because I mean, look, man, a lot of these overreaches, you know, happen with like the Department of Justice, you know, in the way that I look at civil asset forfeiture and the way the federal government wants to split profits, you know, from seized goods with local police departments to encourage them to participate, that kind of thing. You know, it would be nice to have somebody specifically watching out for that kind of stuff too, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And no, that makes perfect sense. And I'd kind of like to add here too that sometimes when I say the word overreach or you hear the word overreach, there's certain words that sort of strike traditional conservatives and traditional liberals in a different way. Overreach tends to be one of those things that, you know, anecdotally conservatives sort of identify with more than liberals. But you know, if you look at some of the articles coming out of, for instance, Vox or The Atlantic, you know, you see liberals having a lot of issue with some of the legislation coming out of our Republican-controlled Congress or the executive orders coming out of the Trump administration. So I think, again, this is something that applies sort of across the spectrum of political ideology.
Yeah, you see, when I talk about overreach on this show, I mean, it's generally, I'm talking about, I don't know, breaking the law, something being illegal. I don't really see, you know, overreaching and working around and creating loopholes to the law as honoring the law, right? So when you're doing something to circumvent the law, you're breaking the law. You know, like why is it important to different states? Because you know, each state should effectively be able to run its own governments kind of the way they want, right? Where like if California wanted to be ultra liberal and progressive, then that they should be allowed to do that within the confines of the Constitution, right? But if Georgia wants to be more conservative, then, you know, they should be able to run their government that way. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you mentioned a very important point there, which is that within the confines of the Constitution. You can't, you can't, that's sort of the starting point, right? So everything is limited by that. But within those bounds, yes, different states are allowed to do different things. So that's sort of what federalism is. And I would also mention that if you want to take a look at this legislation, the state we're working in right now, as we speak, is North Carolina. So we have the legislation. It is directed at North Carolina, but legislation would be similar in other states as well. And you can go to our website, www.federalistcoalition.com, and you can see it right there on the front page. You click on it. And, you know, if this is something that sounds interesting to you and you're outside of North Carolina and you feel like you want to maybe get something started in another state, we'd be happy to work with you or possibly at the very least talk with you. And you can just send us an email at info@federalistcoalition.com. Don, I should also add here, while we're talking about the website, that, you know, we're constantly looking for volunteers.
All right.
You know, individuals that have experience or interest in, you know, legislation, website design. Currently, we have an ad posted for somebody to help manage our website or social media accounts. Or, you know, really, the reality is we're everyday Americans. And if you just feel compelled to check us out and get involved, we'll find a place for you. But definitely looking for more help all the time.
That's a good point. I mean, just because we don't represent any specific political parties doesn't mean that, you know, if you belong to one that you're not welcome. I mean, that's actually That's kind of the point of the whole coalition idea in our name, anyway, isn't it? I mean, it's that a coalition is an alliance of people, who can set aside whatever personal differences they have to come together for a greater cause.
Absolutely. We don't always agree on everything. I would say we do have some position pieces on various hot button issues on our website. And you can go and take a look at those. But, even then, some of our members don't agree with every one of those things. And that's okay. That's, again, like you mentioned, that's what being a coalition is all about. And the reality is that's how our government is supposed to work. And so hopefully we can help bring that back the way it should be.
Yeah, fair enough. Just as an example, how would the Federalist Coalition approach the Rand-Trump executive order?
Yeah, so this is a great example, actually. So I would say even within our own organization, there's a little bit of debate about, what this executive order represents. How is it applied? Is it legal? Is it not legal? Is it appropriate or not appropriate? What I would say is this, and this is sort of my take on it, is that executive orders are really meant to help legislation function. So if you think of legislation as a car, the executive order might, for instance, be the gas. They're not meant to manipulate, change, or create legislation, right? So this particular order, it isn't even really an order. It's actually more of a memorandum or guidance on how to interpret a federal statute that's been on the books for a long time. And so I would say I kind of agree with the premise. I like perhaps what it's doing. I'm not so sure about the means. I think it might set or continue the precedent that's been set, by the last president as far as executive orders go, and sort of expanding their role. And that I don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I see the legislation as being beneficial overall, especially to the cause of federalism. I really take issue with ruling by edict, which is kind of like Obama and his pen in his phone. That's how he was gonna handle things, and it seems like if you can't do it the right way and you can't get Congress to agree, then you keep working at it and you find a way. You put it all out there, so that we can really see and understand what's going on. And I'm not sure. I'm still undecided. I think if I were to go hardline on it, which I tend to do with most things when it comes to the Constitution, I really wouldn't like how it's being done, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the meat of it. And I think that's what some of our legislators fail to do today is they don't step back and look at things and go, look, all right, what does the Constitution say? And, hey, look, if it doesn't say anything about this, then maybe we should really question what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, well, I really like this topic because it does make us question a lot of things. It's difficult to have to oppose legislation you like because it violates the Constitution. That's really, it's what being a Federalist is kind of all about to me.
Absolutely.
Taking a serious look at the Constitution and applying, what our governments are doing to this document, having this supreme law of the land, just lay it all out the way things are supposed to function makes it really easy, I think. I love what we're doing. I'm really glad that we met and that we've, got this Federalist Coalition thing going on. But listen, man, I guess we're going to be running out of time here pretty soon. Do you have any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I want to say, again, thank you for the opportunity for letting me on. And, Don, I feel the same way. I'm so glad we got a chance to meet and we're doing this together. You've become a good friend of mine, and I appreciate that. If people want to check out the website, I know I've said it twice already, but one more plug for it. Go to www.federalistcoalition.com or check us out on Twitter or Facebook. Just search @RealFedCo. And I should also add, last but not least, by any means, we do also have an Instagram account. You'll just have to search Federalist Coalition, but have a lot of very cool historical tidbits that come up on that. So it's a good thing for people to see.
Well, that's cool. Well, thanks, Taylor. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy evening to join us, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.
All right, man. Take it easy.
All right, bye.
And with that, I'll take a short break, and I'll return with more Don on the Air in just a moment. Each year, all across the country, millions of chickens and cows are tortured in slaughterhouses. These places are impossibly overcrowded, and these poor animals are forced to live in such tight living conditions that they often trample each other, desperate to get out. But now you can help. You can help lessen the torturous living conditions of overcrowded slaughterhouses. Simply consume more beef and chicken. The faster we eat, the sooner their pain ends. Together, we can end their suffering. This is Don on the Air. Yeah, man. That is one thing I definitely love about this work. It's choosing the bumper music. Now, I usually select something that fits topically, in one way or another. Now, that hasn't been true 100% of the time, but it's been close. Yeah. It's nice to have access to a library of music. In this industry, you never really know that'll always be true, so I'm enjoying it while I can. Now, welcome back to Don on the Air. It helps that I grew up in the mixtape era. I know some of you have no idea what that means, unless you watch the Goldbergs or something, but, I don't know, maybe today people just use playlists. Mixtapes, they could be as much of an art form as people say. When I made a mixtape, I always selected the perfect songs. To me, it was a form of storytelling. And it was trickier when you were limited in the music selection. And, that made it all the more sweet when you found that perfect combination of theme and length. Yeah, let's not forget cassettes were limited by the length of the tape. You couldn't just delete an old game you stopped playing or finally get around to deleting pictures of Aunt Rose's cats, to make more space. Now, I was never the guy that recorded intros or narrated my tapes or anything. I always thought that was kind of weird. You're supposed to let the music tell the story, right? And sure, it's nerdy. There are ways we're all nerdy, right? Most of us anyway. Think of something in your life that you know far too much about. Can you recite obscure sports statistics? Nerd. How about band facts? Nerd. Can you recite all the amendments to the Constitution? That's right.
Get those nerds! Nerd! Nerd!
Yeah, sure, I'm a nerd for even playing that, but it's cool. Well, constitutional nerds are cool anyway. And speaking of constitutional nerds, Austin Petersen keeps digging himself into a deeper hole, doesn't he? Yeah, you remember him. He was the potential libertarian presidential candidate who said a lot of the right things in regard to liberty, freedom, and stressed an adherence to the Constitution. And that's the reason why I keep an eye on this guy. Maybe he'll get in somewhere and make a difference. And right now, that's what he's trying to do as he runs for Senate in Missouri as a Republican, of all things. Now, my opinion about him personally is kind of, I can't vote for him anyway. And I do think he's a great guy, on and on, It's true. He just made a crappy career move and hasn't realized it yet, so he's just continuing to make it worse. I mean, case in point, Petersen's now taken to Twitter to slam Never-Trumpers. In a tweet over the weekend, Petersen proclaimed, "The Never-Trump movement is composed generally of neocons, disposed from power and aided by liberals who appreciated their efforts." Well, allow me to look at things with eyes wide open. You know, Petersen, he's been a champion of the common man ever since he entered politics just a short while ago. Now, let me tell you, every single Never-Trumper I knew, and I knew hundreds, I knew of thousands, but you're talking about nearly every Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio supporter. Most of these were everyday Americans, the common man. Now, he may have been referring to the leadership, of which I would be giving him the benefit of the doubt, because he certainly hasn't clarified that's what he meant. But I wonder, if you're starting to see what's really going on here. Because back in July, Austin Petersen, he began spending all his principle when he became a Republican. But Petersen, he was the, I believe in a world where married gay couples could defend their marijuana fields with automatic weapons guy. Yeah, he joined the party least likely to let any of those things happen. Well, he did so because, he wants to get his foot in the door somewhere, and, the Senate's a great place. He likely chose Missouri because McCaskill, the Democrat incumbent, is considered among the weakest senators up for re-election. And you see, up until then, the Republicans didn't have any big names running against her. Easy pickings, right? Yeah, until the Missouri State Attorney General Josh Hawley entered the scene. And then Steve Bannon, of course, he continues to threaten the GOP with untold havoc. So the GOP continues to kiss his ring. And part of that process is asking Bannon to pick favorites in various Senate races, Missouri among them. It seemed at first that Bannon was leaning away from Hawley, but after Hawley got on the phone and begged and pleaded for his support, who really knows? The one thing we do know is Bannon continues to threaten to overthrow the GOP by backing anti-establishment candidates. Now, with Bannon suddenly sniffing around Missouri, and, there's virtually no media attention about any talks between Bannon and Petersen, you must appreciate the timing of Petersen's sudden anti-Never-Trump stance. Even Petersen acknowledges, you have to play the game. Well, that's exactly what he's doing, playing games. And you need to understand, I still like the guy. This is not personal. Having reviewed the other candidates so far, I would still support Petersen over the rest if I were a Missouri voter. I simply prefer to make my decisions with eyes wide open. Now, my point in mentioning all of this is not to hurt Petersen. My comments will be watered down the back of his true believers and fall on deaf ears, if any at all, when it comes to Missouri voters. I'm a Georgia boy, so I know very little of Missouri politics. I mention the Petersen thing because he serves as an example of why the system needs to be changed. Austin Petersen, he's only doing what he thinks he needs to do in order to be in a position to create positive change for our country. I truly believe that. The problem is, he shouldn't have to sacrifice his principles in order to make our country a better place. People claim the Uniparty's defenses are too strong. You can't crack through the shell. And you know what? They're right. Nonetheless, that's what people continue to do. Try to penetrate the shell. Maybe it's time to take a different approach. If the shell's too hard, well, what lies underneath? If we engage our citizenry directly, re-empower them with the importance of the Constitution, and how it all works for them, well, who knows how far we could go. Well, I know how far I've gone, and that's all the time I've got for this week. So tune in next week for the Dawn on the Air Halloween special. No, I'm not exactly sure what we'll discuss, but it'll be Halloweeny and special. But let's be real, it's the Halloweeny that makes it special. Anyway, thanks again to my guest, Taylor Fischer of the Federalist Coalition. Remember, you can find them at RealFedCo on Twitter and at their website, thefederalistcoalition.org.com. Either way. And you can always reach me at Dawn on the Air on Twitter, or send an email to dawnontheair@KLRNradio.com. Well, on my way out, just remember, You don't have to sacrifice your principles to make a difference in this world. I'd argue those who make the greatest impact are those who believe in themselves. If the message of liberty doesn't stand boldly enough on its own, then it never really had a chance at all, did it? Well, I don't believe that. I can't. And I won't.